I would say that I've lost more money by fighting over something that I should not have bothered to do because it was clear that it was a good deal.
I think we call that tripping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Welcome. You're listening to the Apartment Investing Show. This is where you'll learn how to start or scale your apartment investing career. Your host, Adam Adams, has educated thousands of investors on the topics he shares on this show. Adam and his guests will show you how to create residual income by investing in apartment communities. Now, here's your host, Adam AAA Adams.
You're listening to the Apartment Investing Show. I'm your host, Adam AAA Adams, and you're in for a treat. We've got a great episode today. The 87-year-old Sam Freshman, who wrote Principles of Real Estate Syndication, the Bible, as it's called in the West. He wrote that in 1971. He started real estate in 1957 after graduating law school at Stanford. His company is Standard. It's hard to say Stanford and then Standard. His company is Standard Management, which he founded in 1960. They currently own 3,000 multifamily units, 3 shopping centers. Oh, and also he's owned medical buildings, hospitals, as well as industrial and office buildings in about 15 states. In the past, he taught business at USC, Stanford, and UCLA, and he has been through 6 recessions. So we're going to talk a little bit about today is how to prepare for the next recession. How is COVID potentially going to affect the economy today? And then we'll get into the 2 biggest mistakes that Sam Freshman has ever made. Sam, welcome to the show.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Adam.
It's phenomenal to have you. You're a legend, Principles of Real Estate Syndication, the Bible that you wrote in 1971, which, as we discussed before, is available on Amazon, so they can go and find that. You have another book. Tell them about the other book real fast.
The other book is, here, since they've got pictures, this is the Bible. Got it?
Yes,
That's
Principles of Real Estate Syndication. Most of the people listening are just hearing us, so we don't need to show those. But all right, well, he's got the other one. Never be
old enough to know better. You know, your mother would always say, "You're old enough to know better than that" when you made a mistake. But nobody's ever old enough to know better. That's the first thing I learned. So it's about all the things I learned. It's called Never Be Old Enough to Know Better, and you will succeed in life and business.
So your father told you when you were growing up that, and was it Minnesota? Michigan. Your father in Michigan told you when you were growing up that real estate is where the money's at. You've definitely experienced that now, but take us back to 1957 after graduating at Stanford. Before you started your Standard Management, what was your first ever deal? What did that look like, and what was going through your head?
Well, I think my first deals were downtown L.A. office buildings. I'd moved to California, of course, to go to college, graduated, stayed there, came down to Los Angeles because it was easier to get a job than in San Francisco in those days. And I had got a job downtown with a company called, I don't even remember what it was called. But anyway, it was the original developer of Hollywood, California. And was in the 1890s, it was a major developer, and it was liquidating. And so that's how I was in a 1920s high-rise bank building, and those buildings could be bought 200,000 square feet with a bank on the ground floor, everything upstairs empty. Downtown Los Angeles was like a ghost town. And I'd buy those buildings for maybe a couple $100,000. Later, we'll talk about what would happen later. And that's where I started. I bought actually 4 of those buildings over about a 3-year period. Yeah. And then, then I went to work for the Jacob Stern Company, the original developers of Hollywood, California.
Awesome. Good stuff. Okay, so those were your first deals ever. And I know that during the pre-interview, before we started recording, you did mention that you used to have more shopping centers and more hospitals and more industrial, but right now you said, I'm focused more on multifamily because I think you said that's where it's at.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about why multifamily after having all this vast experience?
Well, from my experience, I made more money on multifamily, and I think, as I mentioned, I've been through 6 recessions. Always got through the multifamily market during a recession with very little loss. People need a place to stay. If you have 15 or 20, or in those days, that was the size. Today, we don't do anything less than about 200 units per project because there's certain, and I might mention this for those that are interested in why we focus so much on that. There's great opportunities to save money with size in the multifamily period. If I have a manager of a 50-unit building, I have to pay $50,000 in equivalent to giving them a rental apartment and cash and so on. But if I have a 300 or 400 unit project, I only have to pay maybe $90,000, and so much less per unit. And everything is less per unit on a major property. So if you have a 200 unit or a 300, I've done apartment buildings of 600 and 700 units per project. Operating costs come way down per unit.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for going into that. I really appreciate that. So if the listeners wanting to get into multifamily, should they focus on the 15, 16, 20 units in the beginning? Should they focus on the 70 to 100 to 200 units in the beginning? Or should they do what Sam Freshman's doing now, which is the 200 to 600 units per project?
Well, you have to start out somewhere. It depends on where you get the money. And by the way, I wrote a series of books called The Smartest Way to Save because a lot of people would come to me and ask, how do you get the money originally? And if you're going to be a syndicator and use other people's money, you've got to have some of your own. Where do you get that? You learn how to save. Because the first question every investor I've ever had has asked is not, what is the cap rate? It's not where the building is. They want to know, how much of my own money am I putting in? So you've got to get a stake to get going, and you can do that. It's quite easy to save money if you work hard. And another thing to do if you're really anxious to get started quickly and don't want to have to spend the time to raise a couple $100,000 over 5 years or something, you find yourself a partner, a seasoned syndicator, and you work with them for a while. And when you're out talking to investors, you don't talk about what you invested. You talk about what the sponsors are investing. And you're one of the sponsors. They'll say, well, how much you've got in this? You don't say, well, I've only got $10,000 in it. You say, well, the sponsors, with which I'm one, have put in $5 million of their own money. That's usually the first question you get. Then they want to know the rest of it.
Love it. That's really good feedback. I really appreciate that. So you've been through 6 recessions. And so my first real question that I really want to dive into is just, how do we, as listeners, as people that are getting into syndication, or we're already owning some apartments, maybe we don't want to syndicate, maybe we just want to own them. But regardless of the direction that we're going to go, if we're wanting to own these multifamily buildings, and we're concerned that there might be a recession coming, what are the tips and tricks that we need to know to be able to prepare for the next downturn?
Well, I think one of the things is you have to specialize in something. Now, there are people that make a lot of money with retail. There's a lot of people that make money with industrial, etc. You have to decide what you like and what the property is going to be. What's your product going to be? I happen to like multifamily. Multifamily happens to be the most popular property at the moment. But I've been in the past during periods of time when a lot more money could be made in developing shopping centers. Today's shopping centers are actually down on the list. And I think a lot of people that have them are sorry they did. You can get a 7% return today on a Class A shopping center because everybody's afraid of what the future of retail is going to be, online retailing, etc. On the other hand, probably the best you can do, at least out here on the West Coast, it's a little better, the returns are a little higher on the East Coast, would be maybe 4%. So in the same neighborhood, if you bought an apartment building, you get a 4% return. If you bought a shopping center, you get a 7% return. That's pretty much, I think, throughout the United States. Maybe a little difference, as I said, between one section and another. So I would say decide what area you want to be in. Now, there's people that want to make money rather quickly, buy and sell, and be developers, or you buy and hold, which is what we do. We don't make a big gain from month to month, but we make a lot of money over time. It's the miracle of compound interest. The problem you have with, if you're going to think you're going into development, is you got to be pretty sure that you're going to make some pretty good money when it's finished, because there's a time value to money. And a lot of people forget that. On the West Coast, there's a lot of regulations, difficult getting approvals. It could take you 3 or 4 years to finish something out here in say, Los Angeles or San Francisco, than it might do, say, in Chicago or some of the eastern cities. So one of the reasons that's one of the reasons we don't do ground up development. We do a lot of value add. And I've always found that for me, it's cheaper to buy something than to build it if you can find a good deal.
So one of my big takeaways from what you said was to specialize in something, make sure you're focused on something. Another one is to just kind of notice where we are in which market you're in, because they're all kind of different. Is there one other tip that you can give to a new listener who's about to get started into their first multifamily, with how to prepare for a potential downturn? What's one other thing that a new person would want to look out for?
Well, I think a lot of people that have been in it a long time and succeeded will tell you not to over leverage, because when a downturn comes, I've had friends that were worth much more money than me, but they had 80% loans on their buildings. They lost them all. We don't go over 60 or 65% when we buy a new property, because we want to be able to. We do a stress test like the banks do. Can we still pay the mortgage and all the operating expenses if rents go down 30%? So we project that out, and we put in at least 35% equity.
That is good stuff. I like that. The stress testing is a huge takeaway for the listener today, to understand that they need to, when we're buying a small or a big or a giant 600 unit, that we need to make sure that we understand what would happen if we lost rents, if the economy slowed down, if we got more vacancy, if we got more turnover, to stress test that, to test it against the potential downturn. And you mentioned that some of your friends that are worth a lot or have had a lot of they were doing more 20% down, and you're doing more 30 or 35% down. And it sounds like that has helped you to not have to lose in a downturn. So that's really, really good feedback. The next question that I have is, today, as we're recording this, we're in the end of May, and COVID is still on the top of everybody's mind, and it's on the top of my mind. And I wanted to find out what your feedback would be with COVID, what it might do to the overall economy over 2021 and 2022. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think your guess is as good as mine. I don't really know. It could go one or two directions. It could be like like the SARS situation and be over rather quickly, or it could drag on for a long time. I would say that it's at least 50-50 being a long time, because this seems to be a lot worse in many respects than the last two virus recessions we had. It could come out. We have 30 million unemployed, which is the highest it's been since the 1930s. Whereas we just left off the highest employment around January or February, where we had almost no unemployment, relatively. I think that's the first time that's happened in this country in a long, long time. So we've got the problem of the added problem that this virus seems to be spread very quickly. If you remember, in January and February, and the next election would have been decided because Trump was riding high, there was no unemployment for practical purposes, which has not happened in a long, long time. I think he's a little bit worried now, but if we didn't have the virus, you could bet on the election next time pretty quickly. But I think that it's going to be a coin toss, which means you have to be relatively conservative if you want to survive. If you're a gambler, and some of my friends are, and they, as I said, they do a lot of ground-up construction and buy empty buildings and things like that, then you can follow that. You might come out twice as good as I'm going to. However, if it goes in the other direction, you're going to be wiped out. So that's my choice. I took I won't make as much, but I know I'll survive.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what my team does, and I'm really glad to hear you say that. People are asking, Adam, why aren't you buying right now? Why have you decided not to buy right now? And to me, it's just because I don't know what's going to happen. I love that term that you use. If you're a gambler, then you're going to be developing, and you're going to be buying empty buildings. But if you're a conservative, you're going to be buying cash flowing properties where you can already see the cash flow coming in. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah, we want to check in the first month after we close. People come along and they have these great deals, and they'll say, you're going to double or triple your money in 3 years or 5 years. And we have something that we tell people, to be honest, since we're buy and hold, don't expect to be out of this in 3 years. If you want to make big money, you're going to have to stay with us for 10. And we won't make a huge move each year, but generally property goes up 3 to 4% per year in most of these fields. And if you're conservative, you won't be wiped out in the next recession, and you just keep going. As I said, I've literally made millions of dollars, but not quickly.
Yeah.
It took me 60 years to get where I am now, but frankly, I've got a lot of zeros. But I
Great.
never made it quickly.
So Sam, the next part that I want to get into now that we've had an opportunity to discuss, the multiple recessions that you've been through and what we should be doing to protect ourselves. And after talking a little bit about your thoughts on what COVID might be doing for the economy right now, I want to really get into these two mistakes that you had. And I know there was two pretty large ones that we can learn from. And so, Sam, we are going to get into that. But first, I'm gonna take a break and for our sponsor, and so we'll be right back.
This episode was made possible by Adam's Inner Circle program. This exclusive group is a collection of industry leaders, influencers, passive investors, and strong operators. This is the type of community you want to join, where we come together multiple times each month, virtually and in person. We support each other, invest with each other, and even interview each other on our podcasts, and invite each other to speak at our live events. If you're ready to take your real estate investing to the next level, this is the group for you. Fill out an application today by following the link in the show notes.
And we're back with the 87-year-old Sam Freshman, who's forgotten more about real estate than most of us put together could remember. So I'm just so happy to have you on the show, Sam. And I'm excited to get into these two giant mistakes that you made, because it might save my listener millions of dollars if they hear it. So, Sam, let's go into the first mistake.
I didn't buy enough.
Okay. Tell us more.
In my early days in particular, once I got a bunch of investors, I could have bought a lot more. And so in that regard, I would say I'm conservative, etc., but I was a little too conservative. I mean, I take a deal in those days, and for $100,000 or $200,000 on a $3 or $4 million deal, it was really a great deal, and I got a little greedy, and somebody else would come in and buy. Today, as you have experienced, I'm sure, as we all do, if it makes sense, don't push too far with the seller. Let them make a little bit of money and pay that extra 5% that was holding up, because somebody else is waiting in the wings to jump on that deal. So that was a big mistake.
Very, very interesting. I love that. That makes so much sense, and it's resonating with me. Well, first off, you're saying that the biggest mistake was that you didn't buy enough. And then part of that, it sounds like you're saying that when we're getting greedy and wanting just to have a screaming deal, sometimes we don't get a deal because we're trying to have the seller go down below what they feel is comfortable. And when we do that and worry about that 5% right there, it makes us lose in the long term. Is that accurate?
Yes, I would say that I've lost more money by fighting over something that I should not have bothered to do, because it was clear that it was a good deal.
I think we call that tripping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Right, something like that.
Something like that.
The other side of that is I always sold too soon.
Okay. And so with those properties that you were selling too soon, about how long were you selling, and what should the listener be thinking is the right amount of time? Oh,
well, I've come to the conclusion that there's never a time that it's right to sell. If you're smart enough to figure out what's going to happen in the future, then maybe you can do it, but I'm not that smart. So I'm just relying on compound interest and growth. As I said, I've been through these 6 recessions. Properties go down about 30% in value, but they always come back higher than the highest point before the recession. in the 60 years I've been, it's never failed to go way beyond what it was before the recession, when we thought things were really great. If you think they're really great now, I would say 10, 15 years from now, they're going to be fantastic. And properties will be worth twice what they are now because of the way compound interest works. So I would say that was my other mistake. I was talking about those downtown office buildings in the 1920s that were empty, above 13 floors, only the ground floor occupied, and I'd fix them up a little bit, and I'd sell them for double what I paid for them. That is, I paid $1 million, I sold them for $2 million. Can you guess what they're worth today, those 4 buildings?
Over 100 million, maybe?
An average of over $100 million.
Wow. Insane.
All 4.
Insane. So the biggest 2 mistakes here is, number 1, not buying enough, and number 2, selling too fast. And when I asked you what's too fast, and you said the amount of time to hold a property is forever, I think is basically what you said. Just never sell.
Well, occasionally you will. If the neighborhood changes,
Okay.
so let's say out of several hundred properties, we did sell some of the medium-sized and smaller properties to go into larger ones, and that's okay if you need the capital. But I never expected those buildings to go to $100 million. If I'd known, instead of being a millionaire, I'd be a billionaire today. But I just blew it. It took me about 10 years.
Funny.
First 10 years I bought and sold quite often. And by 1970, we weren't selling anymore.
Makes complete sense. I love that. We've gotten a lot from you today, Sam. I really appreciate it. Again, that book that I want to direct the listener to is called Principles of Real Estate Syndication, which Sam Freshman wrote that in 1971. So how long ago was that now? 50 years, 49 years. Wow.
Right.
And so people in the West Coast call this the Bible when it comes to real estate syndication. So if you're a listener and you're thinking about getting into apartments, whether you are planning on doing it with your own money or with other people's money, I think it's going to be beneficial for you to go and grab that Bible, the Principles of Real Estate Syndication, just to understand what Sam has learned through I think he was in the business for 24 years when he wrote that book. So there's a lot in there. Please go and check it out and leave him a rating and review and say that you heard him on the Apartment Investing Show. Sam, that'll make you happy if they say that they heard about you on the Apartment Investing Show, right?
Oh, sure. Listen.
All right.
So what is your horn? Nobody listens.
Sam, what's the best way for the listener to find you or get a hold of you if they have some questions?
Well, I would say my email is sfreshman@standardmanagement, spelled out, .com. So that's a good way to reach me. And I'd suggest that. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think that's how we met.
That's right. Right. Someone told me about you, and so I reached out to you on LinkedIn.
Right.
And you are very responsive, by the way. So for the listener, he's very responsive on those LinkedIn messages. So definitely. And the email again is sfreshman@standardmanagement, spelled out, standardmanagement.com. And that's in the show notes. So if you're listening and you're driving, don't worry. It's already in the show notes. You can go and reach out to Sam. Sam, I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm really grateful.
All right. We had a lot of fun.
Grateful to have you. I'm going to let you go, but until next time, think outside the box. As a reminder, any investment opportunities mentioned on this show are for accredited investors only. And if you're interested in working with me and my team, then go to realbluespruce.com and click Get on the List. It's that simple. Just click Get on the List to start passively investing. This has been an episode of the Apartment Investing Show with me, Adam Adams. All rights are reserved. And if you haven't done so already, then make sure that you absolutely smash that subscribe button. And I'll see you on the next episode.